Welcome back to Cinemax Recaps. Today I will show you an action, adventure, fantasy film from 2017, titled Kong, Skull Island. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In the year 1944, someplace over the South Pacific, Lieutenant Hank Marlowe, Will Britton, lands with his parachute on an island after his plane accidents. Another warrior, Gunpei Akari, Miyavi, lands. Marlowe takes out his firearm on Akari and fires, however misses. Akari takes out his weapon and pursues Marlowe. They run into the timberland and battle when they pass by a precipice. Akari almost skewers Marlowe with his sword, yet Marlowe pulls it away. Akari then, at that point, has Marlowe on the ground and almost kills him before a massive gorilla hand shows up. The two men then, at that point, see the chimp, Terry Notary, transcend them. In 1973, in Washington, D.C., government official Bill Rhonda, John Goodman, and geologist Houston Brooks, Corey Hawkins, show up to meet with Senator Willis, Richard Jenkins, to get subsidizing for a campaign to an as-of-late found area called Skull Island. Willis isn't too enthused about the thought, yet Rhonda prods him into yielding. Prior to leaving, Rhonda discloses to Willis he likewise might want a tactical escort. The Sky Devils group are accumulated on their last day before they can at last return home. Driven by Colonel Preston Packard, Samuel L. Jackson, they incorporate Captain Earl Cole, Shea Wiggum, Slivko, Thomas Mann, Reilly's, Eugene Cordero, Glenn Mills, Jason Mitchell, and Jack Chapman, Toby Cabell, who is Packard's Thinking Correctly handman. Packard gets the campaign and happily acknowledges the work. Rhonda and Brooks go to a bar and track down a previous British Special Air Service commander named James Conrad, Tom Hiddleston, to be their tracker. Conrad is gone up against by two bar supporters who accept he cheated in a round of pool, however he effectively stifles the men. Rhonda is promptly intrigued, revealing to Brooks they've discovered their aid. Conrad sits with Rhonda and Brooks to hear their arrangement. At the point when he hears their proposition, he requests more cash and calls attention to that there's a decent possibility that the excursion will get them killed for reasons including extreme climate conditions or ruthless animals. Inside a darkroom, hostile to war picture taker Mason Weaver, Brie Larson, is fostering some photographs she took of the contention in Vietnam. She gets a call to join the undertaking and she shows up at the base to meet with Packard and his men, in addition to a group of researchers from the organization Landsat, including Brooks's kindred geologists San Lin, Jing Tian, and Landsat representatives Victor Nieves, John Ortiz, and Steve, Mark Evan Jackson. Weaver has qualms about the mission and thinks the military is arranging something awful. Creeks goes over the mission and what they desire to discover on Skull Island. The group sails into the sea prior to taking choppers to the island. They should go through mists that produce tropical storm-like conditions yet can track down a high-pressure pocket that they accept will be a more secure course. After a fierce ride through the tempest, the choppers fly across the space. Weaver takes a few pictures while the warriors start dropping seismic races into the ground, setting off blasts. Very quickly, a tree is tossed through one of the choppers, sending it colliding with the ground. The group then, at that point, sees Kong overshadowing them. He sends one more tree through a chopper prior to getting a couple of more and crushing them into the ground. The enduring colleagues are isolated once they hit the ground. In the midst of the blazes consuming from the remaining parts of the choppers, Packard gazes up at Kong, who peers down back at him. Packard stands up to Rhonda at gunpoint and requests to realize what truly brought them there. Rhonda concedes that he had thought about the presence of beasts like Kong for some time, and he is looking for confirmation for his association. Monarch, Conrad, Weaver, Brooks, Lynn, Slivko, and Nieves are assembled while Rhonda, Packard, Mills, Cole, and different fighters set off to search for Chapman, as he is outfitted with sufficient ammo that Packard plans to use against Kong. As the warriors stroll through a bamboo woodland backwoods, one trooper out of nowhere stops. A bamboo tree has speared him through the mouth. Above them is a Goliath bug that starts assaulting them. Factories is pulled up by the webbing, and the remainder of the officers get cutting its legs going. Plants releases himself, and Packard shoots the bug to death. Chapman is without anyone else almost a waterway. He sees Kong strolling through the stream to keep an eye on an injury he supported from the chopper's gunfire. Kong drinks from the stream and afterward tracks down a monster octopus. He goes head-to-head with it, warding off its arms before he begins to eat it. He then, at that point, hauls the octopus body away. Conrad's gathering is cornered by a clan of locals. As they attempt to guard themselves, out comes a more seasoned Marlowe, presently played by John C. Reilly. He guarantees the two gatherings that they are not destructive to one another and afterward welcomes the gathering past the divider. Marlowe discloses to the gathering that he's been there throughout the previous 28 years and has taken in a great deal about the locals and the actual island. Kong resembles a divine being to them, as he has been shielding them from the animals that stay underneath the earth and have been killing off the locals for quite a long time, just as Kong's own family. Marlowe calls them skull crawlers. They remained underground until the blasts from the seismic energizes woke them. On the off chance that anything happens to Kong, the skull crawlers will overwhelm the island. He likewise recommends that the skull crawlers that have risen to the top are simply adolescents and that a lot bigger one exists. Still alone, Chapman strolls through the backwoods and sits on a log. The log ends up being a monster bug. Chapman takes shots at it, however the animal doesn't fight back. As the animal leaves, Chapman is killed by a skull crawler. Conrad reveals to Marlowe that they intend to come to their meeting point on the north side of the island inside 3 days so they might be protected. Marlowe says that it is impossible in 3 days by walking, so he consents to direct them the correct way. He says the locals goodbye and takes the group on a boat. Soon after riding endlessly, Nieves is grabbed up via predatory birds and is destroyed mid-air. En route, Weaver sees an immense water-wild ox stuck under a smashed chopper. She has a go at lifting it up to free the wild ox, just for Kong to appear and pull the chopper off. He gazes down at Weaver momentarily and leaves. She shows up more awed by him than frightened. Marlowe drives the gathering into the Forbidden Zone, which is a previous milestone between Kong's predecessors and the skull crawlers. The huge remaining parts of Kong's family lie among the field. A skull crawler shows up, driving the gathering to stow away. The skull crawler then, at that point, lets out Chapman's skull and canine labels, which Conrad takes note. Packard and his men come around a similar region. Rhonda is taking pictures and is then grabbed up and eaten by a skull crawler. Another monster appears and begins to assault and pull casualties in with its tongue. The gatherings proceed with their fight with the skull crawlers in addition to an influx of the flesh-eating birds. Marlowe takes out the blade that had a place with Akari and cuts through a few of the birds prior to giving it over to Conrad. Weaver kills one by throwing a lighter into an opening that produces exhaust, which is touched off and sets the animal ablaze. After the battle, they pull together. Packard is as yet set on searching for Chapman. Conrad shows Packard Chapman's canine labels to affirm his downfall. In any case, Packard needs to search for Chapman's ammo stash so they can kill Kong. He is hell-bent on vengeance for the passings of his men, in spite of the complaints of Marlowe, Conrad, and Weaver. That evening, Packard accumulates explosives and lays a snare for Kong. In the interim, Conrad and Weaver experience the monster, however Weaver approaches him mindfully. She puts her hand all over and he is delicate. In any case, Packard baits Kong toward him and touches off the fuel along the water, searing and consuming Kong's hide. Kong tramples Steve and kills one more man in the disorder prior to falling. Packard then, at that point, prepares to set off certain explosives, yet Conrad and Weaver attempt to stop him. They persuade different officers that they need Kong to keep the skull crawlers out. The troopers turn on Packard, who stays disobedient. All at once, the greatest skull crawler blasts out of the ground, driving the gathering to run. Packard remains behind to explode the explosives, yet Kong pulverizes him under his clenched hand. The survivors then head toward the shore as the principal skull crawler seeks after them. Cole remains behind to forfeit himself with the hazardous gadgets he has tied to himself. Notwithstanding, the beast tail stirs Cole into a divider and he explodes in any case. The skull crawler makes a beeline for the gathering until Kong returns and crushes into the monster. Kong utilizes a boat's propeller connected to a length of anchor chain to wood the monster, at long last cutting it on the throat. The best isn't dead and assaults once more. Weaver takes a flare firearm and smacks the skullcrawler in the face with it. Kong snatches the skullcrawler and throws him into the divider, unintentionally thumping Weaver into the waterway. Kong hauls Weaver out and still battles the skullcrawler. He slams his clenched hand down the beast's throat and pulls out its guts. Kong then, at that point, places Weaver down close to Conrad prior to leaving. Soon after, the survivors, Conrad, Weaver, Marlowe, Brooks, Lynn, Mills, Slivko, and Reilly's, withdraw on the boat, and 3 choppers appear at get them. Somewhere out there, Kong watches out to keep securing his region. He pounds his clenched hand and lets out a thunder. As the credits start, we see video film of Marlowe at last getting back to Chicago where he sees his better half again, lastly meets his grown-up child. He then, at that point, plunks down to watch a Cubs game with a wiener and a lager. After the credits, Conrad and Weaver are being held in a cross-examination room by Monarch. Going into the room are Brooks and Lynn, who tell the two that Kong was never the main beast out there and that this world didn't generally have a place with mankind. Streams pulls out certain documents, including a guide of Tokyo, prior to putting on a slideshow. The slides show another group going over cave drawings of different beasts: Mothra, King Ghidorah, Rodan and Godzilla himself. The last thing we hear are the consolidated thunders of Kong and Godzilla.